Hello, this is our Rats with Team 4545 League, analyzing the game between JHB Chess and Quotha. This was played in Team Event 53 in round 1 of the playoffs. Let's have a look. Okay, knight f3, d5. Now, white's going into what appears to be a King's Indian attack, and I'll have a little bit to say about this in just a moment. There are plenty of transpositional possibilities available here. Now, here's one of these moves I criticize, h6. It just defies logic. It spends a tempo. I guess black is planning to tuck the bishop on h7, bishop c8 to f5, and then put it on h7 where it won't get taken. But there's other places to put that bishop, and so what if white goes after it? Black will have an equal game. I don't want to elaborate any more on that, but because I've done it in so many videos, I keep seeing these pawn to rook 3 moves in English descriptive notation. It's either to keep a piece out of that square, g5, or to save the bishop, and just doesn't work. Okay, and they're showing that's the plan. Bishop f5 with the idea of coming back to g7, and with d3 we're more or less now going into a King's Indian attack, and I find this a very interesting choice. Back in the 1970s, Grandmaster Larry Evans wrote a book called The Chess Opening for You. And essentially what it does is it gives white about 8 to 15 standard opening moves to play no matter what black throws against you. And basically it's these moves, and then white will also play c3, knight bd2, queen c2, e4, a4, and at some point this knight on d2 will go to c4. That's the purpose of a4. And in some cases, white plays h3. This keeps the knight out of g4 so that white can put his bishop on e3. And essentially, your opening is done. If you play e4, you've got to be prepared against everything, all the possible defenses. If you play d4, same holds true. But with the King's Indian attack, you get no worse than an even game, and you've eliminated all your opening preparation. And I run an online course on how to improve your chess up to master level, and in my 5th lesson I actually discussed opening repertoire, and this is one of the openings I suggested. And then I went through a lot of lines for those that insist on playing e4 and d4. And recently, for my website, I've been playing this opening. I'm playing a lot of online games over another site, and I've chosen chess.com, and I've chosen to play this opening as white simply so that I can share it with my students, and I have like 550 of them, something like that. I've got a big following now. This thing is getting big. But anyway, it's a great opening for white. I've never used it before, and I don't intend to lose any games with it. I probably will here and there, but if you don't want to lose and learn to play this King's Indian attack, I'm the guy to talk to. I've got this thing, getting this thing down pat. Okay. Anyway, long story. Knight bd7, and let's see how long white follows the chess opening for you. Now this is interesting. Now there's a possible trick here, and I'll show it in just a second. Okay. White goes ahead and plays e4, which is wise. The point is that with now this pawn on h6 may actually have some meaning. Let me just show you. Okay. Normally what I was saying is white will play c3, queen, and queen c2, and then throw e4 in later. Now the point is, black can actually play e4 here, and I think can get away with it. It's kind of tricky. And as I said, this pawn on h6 now has some value to it, because white can't play the thematic knight g5. And it just changes the white game around quite a bit. Now white has other moves, of course. He can play knight d4, he can play knight e1, but black is able to get away with e4. But so white finds the correct move, e4 here, which takes that possibility away from black. So good job, white. And okay, and in some respects this is similar in a way. White set up a similar way to a Philidor's defense with colors reversed. Black, in that case, black will play pawn to c6 and queen to c7, and if you're following the basic premise of the chess opening for you, that's what I like to call it. It's actually the King's Indian attack, but the chess opening for you just has such a nice ring to it. And here the plan of black strategy of h6 is shown, that the bishop is parked safely way on h7, where it's going to pressure e4 and it can't be exchanged off for the white knight. But at the same time, it's not doing much else for black. It's just applying pressure to e4, tying the white pieces up. And black's not in a position to take this pawn. Let's just have a quick look. Okay. And it basically has to do with things we've seen, these tricks on the e-file, and it's a good exercise to sit down and work on this on your own. Those of you that have followed my videos know that I can't show everything in a short video. I think that the way to improve is take your game and start tearing it apart. I can just help point you in the right directions and show things. If I was sitting here working one-on-one with you, then I'd be drilling with questions saying like, what do you plan against this? Show me. I mean, I would already have the idea, but I have to gauge what you're learning, and you can show me, because as a school teacher, I understand that students learn by doing, not by having it shown to you. And I can explain the methods that you may not understand, but as far as your justification, if we're working one-on-one, you would show me what you're planning, and then if you're right, I'll acknowledge it, and if you're wrong, then I'll show you a reason why with a variation and an explanation for it. But white has themes hint. There's all kinds of ways, and it has to do with the position of this white king on the or black king on the open file. So white found the correct strategy, but black should be okay if he allows all that. But anyway, I want to get down to the gist of this opening and see how it progresses. Okay, so now white changes his tune a little bit, and he doesn't go in for the position that I'm familiar with and I'm talking about, but there's nothing wrong with queen e2. It's perfectly logical. There's a lot of ways to play this, but let's just take a quick stock here. What's happened? Both sides have three minor pieces developed, but white has one little advantage. He's castled and his queen is developed. Now it's black's move. He can develop his bishop and get caught up here, and white's going to take just an extra move to get his bishop developed because it's shut in. But essentially, though, the game is even, and we'll just see what happens. So black does develop his bishop, and he finds a good square for it. There's nothing wrong with e7, but c5, it's more active. It's got some indirect pressure on f4. I mean on f2. White may not want to play f4 at some point because it might leave him with an isolated e-pawn. Okay, so let's just move on. And I think king h1 is premature for the reason I just explained. White doesn't want to play f4 necessarily. It's just it could leave him with an isolated e-pawn, and he's several moves away from playing it. And what I like to do sometimes is just play fantasy chess. That's what I call it. I'll just pick a random line and try to show, because I can't move the pieces on just one side, I have to move them on both. And I may not pick the best line, and there's all kinds of sub-variations, but we're not going to go into those because there's so many of them. This video would last 5 hours. I've said all that before. But let's just go ahead and try to have white play f4. Okay? And let's go this way. Let's play knight b3. The purpose is it helps support f4 a little bit, and it does have a tempo on the bishop. Okay? And then we'll just go on about our way. Now, we still can't play f4, so we do have to play the move that white played. Okay? Now it's black's turn. Let's develop a rook. Okay? And now we get f4 in. Now, here's the interesting choice now. If black does nothing, white may push f5 and then try to reorganize things and storm with h3, g4, move his knight on h4, and then try and force g5 in. But let's just assume for a moment that black takes, okay? We're just making an assumption. Now white's got three ways to take. Take with the pawn, the bishop, or the rook. Logically, we want to take with the bishop because the rook might get exposed. But actually, there's a fork there. See, but and like I say, this is just fantasy chess. I'm trying to illustrate a point. Even though the position may be unsound, let's forget for a moment that there's a fork there, and that's the whole reason. White, this is what I talked about earlier. White now has an isolated e-pawn, and black is able to blockade it. Okay, let's put this knight now on e5. Now that's a great square for that knight. Nothing's going to evict that knight unless white makes exchanges. Okay, so let's try to make an exchange. Okay, now black just recoordinates a little bit. Okay, now suppose white trades off a knight. Well, fine. Black's still blockading that square, and that knight has a lot of influence in the white position. It's covering these squares that I've circled. Those are squares that white might want to put his queen on, and now he can't. G4 might be a particularly inviting square because of tactics on the G file and the threat of bishop takes H6. And white's only alternative is to keep making exchanges to get rid of this blockader, and it's going to take him a while to get this knight on B3 maneuvered so it can make an exchange, and the net result, and when it's all said and done, white's still going to have an isolated e-pawn, and that could be enough to cost him the game, or it could be enough to secure black the draw. Okay, so I'm criticizing King H1 simply because I don't think white wants to play F4 in this type of position. He's played an even game, and he's just going to have to be satisfied with that. And the logical thing to do is just what I said. Go ahead with development. You know, development is always the key. If you're not sure what else to do, just develop your pieces. Now, what should white do in this position? Okay. Now, black's got some counter on E4. I didn't mention. Okay, so let's maybe knight B3 wasn't wise, but I was just playing a fantasy line. Okay, let's go ahead and play knight E1. And the reason for knight E1 is that it's not that we're trying to play F4. It's we're trying to recoordinate our pieces here and find better squares for everybody. And then we have to base it on how black reacts. Okay, so the idea of knight E1 is that we have protected E4, and what we want to do now is maybe set up a counter and attack on E5. If we can do that, then we can tie up some of the black chessmen as well. So let's go ahead and try a plan with that and just see what goes down. Now, do we want to play B3? The idea with B3 is to put the bishop on B2 and have pressure on E5. Okay, but maybe we're not ready for it yet. Maybe that plan is just going to be out of the way. So we need to move this knight at some point so that we can get this bishop developed. So the drawback with B3 is black may just kind of take over some squares that white might want, and then white has to stop and evict that bishop, and it just gets a little clumsy. So since we played knight E1, another way to do it is a little redeployment. We can try for the strategy C3, pawn C3. The idea is to clear C2 for the knight so that the knight can go to E3 and we can have pressure on D5. We don't know exactly how black's going to react yet. If he plays his pawn to C5, then that strategy works great because then we're ready to occupy D5, which is a very valuable square to have under control. Okay, so we could stop and play knight D3 in this position. Okay, now the purpose of that is this does threaten to pick up the bishop pair. It does start having a little pressure on E5, and now the bishop can go back to B6. Now if we want, look what we can do. Since we have E4 secured, we can put more pressure on E5, and as I said, now then we don't have to go to C2 with the knight to get to E3. We found a quicker way. We didn't have to stop and move the pawn. Now we may or may not want to take that bishop. Let's assume for a moment we don't want to take it. Okay, now suppose black plays C6. His idea is if you take, I'm going to bring my queen out to B6 and pressure a little bit on that diagonal and on that foul. But the nice thing about this knight on D3 is it's securing B2. So this is a very interesting redeployment that white could have had, and he's keeping his pieces on the board and trying to find coordination for all of his pieces by finding some good squares. So Let's overprotect d5. We're just, wait, whose move? It's white's move. Okay, so let's not take the bishop. Let's think about a new plan. I like the square f5. How about if we put the bishop on? Well, we can't do that yet. e4 is hanging. I want to play knight e3 and bishop h3, but e4 is always coming out to be a problem. Okay, so we got to develop this guy. Where are we going to put it? What's wrong with d2 here? We're going to go to c3 and put more pressure on e5. Okay, so black overprotects. Oh wait, that was hanging. See, I miss one movers. I can understand everything under the sun except for one movers. Okay, so on knight c4, black has to stop and guard this. And like I say, I'm against taking the bishop off, but we can still go back with this plan here, bishop d2. The idea is to put the bishop on c3. And the nice thing about these last several moves, as opposed to king h1, is what's white doing? He's redeploying his pieces and finding good squares for them. And suddenly the white position looks very strong. And every position has potential like this. You just don't want to go into the wrong plan, and as I tried to take some time explaining, pushing for f4 is more of a hope chess type of thing. And for those that don't know what I mean by hope chess, is you're hoping things work out the way you want. And what can happen is if you really look at these on the full scale and you're careful, that a good sound plan can defeat a structural weakness, and white playing for f4 in this position structurally weakens his position and gives him only hope that he can bring up an attack that black can't secure anything against. Okay, so it's kind of a long elaboration on this, but I think these are some of the skills that come with being a chess master that you understand, and I'm trying to share everything I know about chess with you guys and gals so that you could play at my level. That's my desire. Get everyone up to my level. That's what I say I can do. I can make anyone a chess master if you'll dedicate to it. And all I'm doing is taking my methods that I figured out that I used and show them to you. And then as I go over your games here, I can show you a little bit more and about how I think and so forth. And I've got a ton of videos, and a lot of you are watching every one of them. I'm really seeing remarkable increases in playing strength amongst you guys and gals, and I'm just delighted. I want you all to get better than me. Okay, let's go back to the game off the elaboration. God, I love making these videos. You can always just find so much about a game of chess, and it's there. So that's what's wrong with king h1. Now, question, how much time did white spend on king h1? Where's my buttons? Oh, there they are. Okay, I was looking in a different place. I don't have my glasses on, but that's no excuse. Okay, so white spent... Weird leg. He gained 20 seconds on the clock, so he spent 25 seconds on the move. So a little bit impulsive play on his part, but oh well. Let's go on. And black castles, and let's see if any of the strategies that I mentioned come into play. Okay, h4. Well, this kind of takes away from the notion of f4, because if white's trying for h4 or f4, he's just opened up his king position a little bit, maybe too much. It might be that black can occupy some of those key squares, and one of them I'm looking at right now is obvious, is that g4 is available, and white's going to have trouble kicking a knight out of there. Okay, so I think knight g4 is a fine reply, unless I'm missing something tactical. Okay, if knight g4 and bishop h3, you can just come in there and secure it, and white's going to have fun trying to hold on, or trying to get something going over here. Knight h2, well, queen d7. Black will just sit there and hold on to that square. It says, you've given it to me, I want it, it's mine. And then maybe finally white kicks the knight out. Well, fine, okay. Oops. Knight takes, queen takes. And what has black accomplished here? Well, he's accomplished quite a bit. The white king position is not as safe as it looks. And the queen's on an open file, but it's not under any pressure yet. White still hasn't completed his development. I talk in all these videos. How many times have we seen positions where the queen rook and queen bishop stay on those squares forever? Well, one thing I've discovered is it does tend to happen a little bit in the King's Indian attack. So I'm never putting blame on somebody for letting it happen. It's just an observation. Okay. Those pieces tend to stay back in a lot of games, and particularly so in the King's Indian attack. And I've found some ways in some of my videos I've made to show ways to improve that and still play the King's Indian attack and play it effectively. But anyway, White really doesn't have anything to show for his pawn advance. His development's not complete, so if he wants to attack kingside, this rook on e1 needs to be over on g1, and that's several moves from happening. So, and if White's not careful and tries queenside action, maybe Black could start pressuring White's kingside here, start his own kingside attack. I've seen things like that happen. Okay, so h4, a little optimistic, a little impulsive. Okay, c6, and White needs to finish his development. That's the key. Let's see how quick he does it. Okay, bishop h3. Well, that was an idea I talked about wanting to do, but it was in combination with getting a knight to f5, and that's not going to happen in this position. So, I don't know, White's neglecting these guys. How long can he do it? And suddenly, Black's ahead in development, and he's got all four minor pieces out and his queen. And White doesn't have his queen bishop developed. So I would have to say at this point, Black is a little better off. Now, it's not enough to win the game, but Black is better. Now here comes the impulsive chess at its best. Okay, g4. Now, impulsive doesn't mean bad. Impulsive chess is where you look at an aggressive move and play it, and don't consider other ramifications. What I've talked about for the last few minutes is completing development before the attack is launched. Because, and I've said this before, I'll say it again, chess is a game of war. We look at it as just a game, but imagine these are real live human beings out there. If you're setting out to battle less than your full army, you're going to get overwhelmed, especially if your guys are sitting back at home. So for White to really conduct a good attack, he needs those two men that I've circled over on the having an influence on the king side, and they're having no influence whatsoever at this point. So g4 is a little impulsive, but it doesn't mean it's going to lose. Now at this point, Black decides that maybe he better shift over and defend his king position a little bit, but not necessarily so sure he had to take that approach, simply because of his development is superior. What if we just send a rook over? Okay, let's send this. It doesn't even have to go to e8. It can even go to d8. Maybe we can generate something on the open d file. And one thing about d8 is it keeps e8 for a knight, but then again, h4 or h5 is open for the knight. It can in turn hop into f4, and so Black's not doing too bad here. So queen c7 just kind of spent a tempo. The queen came out to b6 and it backed up. How much time did he take on it? He took 12 minutes. Well, okay, to give a full analysis of this, again, I couldn't tell you everything. The video would last 5 hours, and trying to sort everything out. I just try to get to the main gist of things. Okay, so now comes g5, and it's one of the drawbacks with, I've mentioned this in other videos, with pushing a pawn up to rook 3 squares, that when the other side starts pawn storm against it, it gets there a little quicker, because the pawns don't have your pawns don't have as far to go to meet the enemy pawn. Okay, so as I pointed out, h5 is perfectly good square. We're eyeballing f4, and White still doesn't have these guys involved. He never did like my idea of knight b3, just to tempo the bishop and scare Black into retreating it, and then get the guys out. Okay, so moving on. Now finally it comes, knight b3, and now bishop f5. And it's not a bad move, but is it the best move? Again, what does white have to show here? He's got 4 pieces on the king side, and he's offering to trade one of them off, and the other 3 aren't coordinated in any way, shape, or form against the enemy king. Now, one thing I just caught on, what if we have a tactic here? It could get a little tricky. The idea is to come down and take this. Okay, it could get scary here. Black's got immediate pressure on e4. Yeah, white can't allow this. Okay, those open lines are going to help black, because then the bishop will come in behind c7, and all kinds of nasty things can happen. Okay, so bishop f5. And I'm almost tempted to say g6 is a good move, even though it traps the bishop, because it forces white to retreat his bishop, and then black regroups and says, my king is safe, and I'll get that bishop developed later, much later. And there's a method to my madness. A lot of people would never play g6. Oh, I can't play that. Well, think about it. Look what it. Let's see what it does. Okay. Well, white can either give that bishop up, or he can retreat it. Let's just talk about giving the bishop up. Okay. Now, what's white's next plan? He doesn't have these guys out. So at some point, I was talking about bishop d2 to c3. Let's go ahead and do that. Okay. Well, one drawback with doing that is it frees up f4 for the black knight. So maybe white doesn't want to do that. Maybe what white wants to do is play bishop e3. Now, if there's an exchange, you could take with the pawn and accept double pawns. No, you can't do that because knight g3 comes in and you're dead. But then knight f4 is in, and white can't play king e2 to shove a rook over, or g2 to shove a rook over, so he's got to really squirm here a little bit. And black just happily recoordinates things, and so does white. And I actually like black's attack here better than white's. That knight on f4 is just ideally posted. Well, e5 is hanging. I always miss these one movers. I'm just trying to illustrate some ideas. But a lot of people wouldn't imprison their own bishop like that, and I say, well, why not? Give it a try. Because we're not worried about the piece now. The piece is doing things. It can still be moved. It can still get into play much later. We don't have to get it into play now. Let's think about this for the same reason. Look at that white rook. It's just as trapped as that bishop if black plays g6, right? The only difference is white can get his rook out a little easier than black can, but black can get that bishop out. So anyway, let's g6. Maybe the fly in the ointment is that you can just take this right away, and then white's got some threats. Knight g4, and you're eyeballing a couple squares. But so I missed the tactic, but the principle, you're going to get a game somewhere where you have a chance to do that, and it just totally defies logic. And this goes back to one of the things in my program about thinking deficiencies. We get this mindset that we can't do something, and there's almost always an exception to every rule at some point. You can do something, and most people would never even consider g6, but there's certain positions where it can be done, and it can accomplish quite a bit. And if you're down a pawn, big deal. It hurts, but the pawn's not going to beat you until the ending. You have a long way to go before you get to an ending. You're trapping your own bishop, but it'll get out. There's black. Let's just talk about one more time real quick. Let's just put the bishop back on h3. I know bishop takes d7 refutes it. Let's think about getting this. How do we get this bishop out? Okay, there's a lot of ways. Eventually, this pawn's going to come to f6. Not now. The king's a little loose, but we'll get to that. Since white's clearly not going to be attacking too easily on the king side, you can get a knight to h6, and that's about it. There's the setter. Black's just going to play for the setter. His knight's coming to c5. His rook's going to come to d8, and eventually there's going to be some exchanges of some heavy artillery, And then finally, f6 is going to come in, and that bishop on h7 comes to life. Okay? Case in point. Done. All right. So bishop f5, and black took it, and now white's got these menacing-looking pawns. But where's his follow-up? Again, he had, as I said before, he had 3 pieces on the king side, or 4 pieces. Now he's down to 3, and his 2 best attackers are pawns, and they're blocking the open lines of his other heavy stuff. Okay, so again, here we are at move 18. These guys aren't in the game yet, but they're getting closer. They're getting there. Now, I don't think black necessarily needs to make a weakening move like that. Let white do something. Okay, what's white going to do? f6 or g6? Well, wait and see. There's no hurry. We can play a move like knight f4. So what if he takes? That you've got rid of a good potential attacker, and g6 could come under attack, and we can get a rook on f6. There's no longer a bishop to molest it. Okay, now the idea is you want to get the queen here and give mate, right? Well, it's not that easy. First off, it's black's move. So rook f6, and I said that can't be chased away by bishop. So in order to get the queen to h5, we got to move the knight. Let's find where we're going to put it. Can't go to e5. We can go to h4. That protects the pawn. Okay, then how about if we offer a queen trade? Okay, that stops queen h5, and g6 may fall here real quick. Okay, so it's wrong for black to weaken himself here. He's afraid of something, but he doesn't need to be. Okay, so g6, and now the game excuse me. The game takes an interesting shift. White changes his mind on the king side and decides he's going to play on the queen side, and very interesting. This game is so intriguing. That's why this video is going to go so long, because there's so much to it. Okay, a4. White's now going to play on the queen side. Well, maybe he's going to get his work developed this way. It's been sitting there forever, and black says, well, I want my bishop on that diagonal. No, you're not going any farther, pawn. So that's a good move. Now we're back to the king side. Now there's some pressure on g6, and black allows white to take there if he wants, and he doesn't. But now the pawn is nothing's guarding it, because the defensive power of a pin piece is purely imaginary. Okay, so moving on. Well, just take it. Knight takes g6. What's wrong? Oh, there's a check. Sorry. Okay, got a check. Now the threat is knight takes g6 or f takes g6. Either one will work. Knight takes g6 threatens a nice nasty fork. So black's got to figure something out here. And he brought this on himself by weakening his position. And so he comes up with this move. Okay. That's fine. It breaks the pin, and it battens down the hatches on g6. Okay, so now white goes back to the queen side. As I said, the play switches over. Excuse me. So I think at some point black could consider going for some kind of an attack, but he shut in his bishop. You know, I didn't comment about c5, just running out of ideas and time. I mean, this thing can go forever. But the bishop's going to have to get redeployed to c7, even if we have to sacrifice a pawn here, although it's not necessarily a sacrifice. It also blocks this diagonal of the queen, but white's king is just as much trouble as you might think black's is in, because black's king is actually kind of safe. I was talking about it as being safe earlier. And why is it safe? Because white has no development over there, and now he's sending pieces to the queen side. Okay, so finally the bishop comes out. Okay, so e4 is an interesting candidate move. Even no, you can't play f6 in this position. g6 hangs. Okay, let's move on. Okay, so e4 comes in. Now, what's interesting is black has now shut in 2 of his diagonals. So, but maybe he's found a new one. Okay, so let's move on. But white goes and grabs that pawn, and now the knight's coming into play. Now black's the one with the dangerous kingside attack. Now black has 4 pieces on the king side, and white only has 1. And e3 may come in at some point, opening up a new diagonal. I really like black here. Okay, so offering a queen trade might make seems to make sense. It gets away from a lot of possible checkmates that what black could run into. How could black have avoided that? Well, one way is e3. Okay, the point is if queen b5... Oh, wait, we're going to hang this guy. Dang it. But so what? Queen e4. We're on a knight 2. And we have potential threats, and we have check threats. I'm not sure how much of this is all sound. That's up for the players to decide when they look at it, but gosh, white's just asking for trouble here. Anyway, let's go back, go on. Knight e5, queen here. Now the queens get traded. So that takes a lot of the blunt away from black's potential attack. And now the game takes an interesting turn here. White's going to end up with tripled pawns. How often do you see tripled pawns? Well, you do every now and then, but there they are. White's 3-on-1 pawn majority is nullified. He's a pawn ahead, but I'm playing for a win if I have black here. I'm going to try to exploit those pawns on the king side and not worry about white's pawn majority because it's neutralized. Okay, I think knight f3 check, though, is premature, but what else is there? Well, you've got to find a way to attack these pawns, and how are you going to do that? Okay? This one can't move, so it seems to be the logical pawn to attack, but what do you attack it with and how? So the first idea I want to play is just knight g4. And the reason for that is that it just creates some new squares and some new opportunities. Rook coming into e5, perhaps. That's got the sideways idea of going after these guys. Okay, that's an idea. And then putting pressure on f5. But I think knight f3 check is just wrong because white can trade the knight, and that was a useful attacker that black had, and it was much better posted than the white counterpart. Okay, so let's move on. And now we've reached this interesting position. Now, what's black going to do? What's his plan here? If he's not careful, white could actually end up checkmating black here in a hurry on the h-file. But that pawn at f3's in white's way. It's a very, very double-edged position, and both sides are taking their time, fortunately. But what does black do to get out of this kind of little bind he's in? His king is stuck. His king's not getting out. It can get to g8 where it's safe if he puts a rook on h8, and maybe it's just better sitting on h7, and then black play. But white can meanwhile double up his rooks on the 7th rank and go after b7, and plus f7 is under attack. Yeah, maybe white's better now. It's just it's such an interesting position. It's hard to evaluate. Yeah, Super Grandmaster look at this and tell you exactly. Well, if I was a Super Grandmaster, I wouldn't be doing these videos. I'd be out on the tournament circuit. I'm not. Instead, I'm here just enlightening you with all my perceptions of what I see going on here. Okay, so I guess black's strategy of knight f3 check is aborted. It's just running out of gas. White's got some long-term potential here now. So b7 is a serious problem. Now I'm not sure what. Well, yeah, now you're on g4, but white can just play bishop e3, and which he does. And did black have to react so quickly to do that? My gut answer is no, he didn't. Simply because what's white threatening? This rook still didn't develop. What if we just grab this pawn? Okay, for the sake of argument, how is white going to proceed here? I guess he's going to play rook d7. Okay, now if rook f8 to guard it, white has a clever little move here. b4 says if you take I got a fork. Okay, so maybe there's some gusto to something to this. You know, f7 is just a problem. What if we just develop this rook? We're going to put it on. Let's put it on. Let's double them up. Yeah, nothing wrong with doubling them up. Let's not double them up. Let's just take the other open file. Now when white comes down to the 7th rank, ouch, we're on this. Well, maybe we have to go to b8. Yeah. Okay, rook b8. Now this move is stopped. So when white comes down here, hooray! We've covered f7. Now white could run down here, but then black has this resource. So what white needs to do is stop and play b6, and you know, it's interesting. Gosh, it's so confusing. White's probably better here. You know, black was so close, but he's just cramped. Anyway, I could go on forever about this, but black felt the need to give up the piece to get out of the bind he was in. But unfortunately, he's now down a piece, and he still has two problems that didn't go away. b7 and f7, and there they are. And ouch. Now maybe black's got some visions of somehow checkmating white. You know, white has to be careful. g4, rook h4, or rook h5 is the threat. How does white deal with that? Now, why does he play rook here? What's wrong with this? What's wrong with this? White's threat, or black's threat, is to play rook from e5 to h5. What does white do about that? Well, he could play, if he plays bishop here, we do this. How does white deal with that? It's a good question. How does white deal with that? The moment the king moves, it's mate and 1. And if the king just stays there, it's mate and 1. What am I missing? I must be missing something. g4. What does white do? The threat is to play rook from e5 to h5. How can white defend that? If he moves his king to f1, it's mate immediately. And I just showed bishop f4 doesn't work. If this pawn was on b4, white would have rook a5, but it's not there. What am I missing? I must be missing something, because I guess myself, I just can't believe that a player would miss what looks to be a forced mate. So there's two choices. I keep looking at this, or I can do what I don't like to do and turn on Stockfish and see what it says. Okay, what does white do? What does white do? Rook. That's a serious threat. Rook h5. Before we do that, what's he threatening here? He's stopping the pawn from going to b4. Big deal. He's threatening a check here, but that blocks the pawn. The rook needs to be there. Maybe he's trying to draw by repetition. I'm thinking check, king here, then come back here, and then hope white comes back. Well, white can run the other way. Hope chess at its best. Okay, so g4. I have to sneeze. Okay, excuse me. All right, let's see. What does white do? Can he generate his own threat? No, he doesn't have time. Because black gets the mate. Okay. I have to do what I don't like to do. I have to turn on the computer and see what the computer says. Because I think g4 wins for black. Rook b5. It doesn't suggest, it says it. It says, well, it said it for a second. It's got it's got white better. It's saying black should play rook to b5. Okay, so I'm going to admit that I didn't see it. What's the defense? Okay, g4. Oh, rook a4. I was close to getting it. Now on rook h5. Yeah, rook takes g4 check. Okay, so I missed it. I'm not perfect. Okay. But I'm not worried about things like this that I can't see everything. You know, we always analyze blunders, but g4 could have been at least worth a try. I mean, I sat here looking at this for 5 minutes trying to figure out what does white do. Naturally, the computer will find it. And white has 16 minutes on his clock. I guess he would find it, but anyway, just if you're getting a piece, sometimes you have to try for what you can try for. So, okay, so rook h4, and I guess white would have seen it. He found that move anyway. Now he plays it. So maybe now the plan is, see, these players saw more than I did. Black saw the idea and he's still trying to generate it, but by guarding g4 first. So now white has to deal with that. Should I humiliate myself further and see how does white defend this? Because it sure looks like black's getting close to mate. I'm just going to move on. This video's long. Now this threatens a new check, and there's the mate threat, and white wiggles out. And that's how he did it. Gives back the piece at the right time. Very good job, white. Okay. And now the game is over, done with, kaput. Black cannot defend against rook a8. And that's what he plays. Very good. Very good. Very good. Now just game's over. I got lag. It's not moving. But I guess it's not important. There's no point in... there it goes. All of a sudden a bunch of moves happen at once. At the end of the game. So, very interesting game. There was so much to it, and obviously I could have said a lot more. I'm sure just like in every video I miss things, but that's the whole point. You know, no analysis is perfect. There's always going to be something there. And this was actually one of the more intriguing games I've looked at in a while. That's why I just kept going and going and going. I knew when I did my first run through on it that there'd be a lot to say about this, and this is becoming one of the longest videos. You know, they normally were 15 minutes, and I've fallen in love making them, and they're often going over 30 minutes and a few over 40. So this one set the record. I can't thank you enough for taking the time to sit through this. Chess is just such a wonderful game, and I'm running out of gas. I want to thank everyone for taking the time again, and I look forward to making another video for you soon. Take care.